Yeah, let me share my screen.
Okay, I can approve it once you do it.
Yeah, because I'm an accountant, so I'm a corporate guy, so I made a PowerPoint deck. Like,
Yeah.
I want y'all to see, because I really want to do tonight. Like I said, I'm not going to do a post. I'm just going to show the research I've done, show where I
Hmm.
was pulling this stuff. It's not bull or bear. It's just this is how Q4 could shake out, and
Hmm.
then people can crowdsource where I have gaps, right? So,
Hmm.
let's see if I can share screen. Share screen 3.
Someone said Bear's dog's name, please.
Oh, Miss Molly. I'm Southern, so you got to put Miss on it. She's a girl,
She's a sweetheart.
about 3 years old right now. So yeah, apologies for the nerdiness of this, but I'm a corporate guy and this is all I know, so this is what you're gonna get.
No, this
Um,
is high quality. Let's fucking roll, man. I like it.
and it's
Had a
just,
whole presentation for the PB show, dude.
yeah, it's like now that I got shares, like we'll firm this up a little bit, right? So, and
Fuck
like
yeah.
I'm not gonna post this to Reddit. So this is a stream only thing, so y'all do what you will with it. Okay, so let's talk about the equity deal. I'm not gonna talk about it in the way Biggie would talk about in terms of the
Sure.
details of strike price and this and that. I'm going to talk more about how it relates to the business as a whole, right? There are some challenges for Q4, but I'm okay with it in the sense that if Sue plays this like I think she's going to play it, then
Hmm.
I think it's a good thing. Full screen, is that better? um, and the Q4 cash flow stuff, let's talk about that. Because we should double check their math as always. Because management presentations, those aren't audited by GAAP or anything, right? So you should always learn to verify their math. And as always, y'all haven't murdered me yet, but please continue that trend of not murdering me. Okay, so I see a lot of stuff around closing stores, and it is like the topic du jour. And I just kind of want to highlight that this is a little more complex than I would think a traditional one, mainly because of the size and the scope of this, right? So, I pulled this screenshot from Google.
Hmm.
This shows the Bed Bath store count as of Jan 9 this year, right? I know they're actively closing stuff, so it's a moving target, but I just want to highlight kind of what Sue and them are having to balance and why if we close these stores like tomorrow, it's going to take a few months for results to trickle in, right? So when you think about, because they're talking about now or as of the release yesterday, they're closing, they want to get down to 360 stores. We're at 690, right? So that's a good chunk. And it's like, well, how do you do that? Because if we're thinking like Bed Bath Management, right, you're probably going to kill the bottom 10% of stores because each store has a profit and loss, right? Like you're going to have a store manager, they're going to have their own income statement, own balance sheet. They got to run it like it's theirs. So the bottom ones, you're probably just going to kill, right? Gone. And this is going to sound a little crass. People's jobs are at stake, and I don't mean to downplay that. It's just I'm
Right.
speaking purely from a business standpoint.
Right.
But when you get past that, it gets tricky, right? Because like look how these stores are clustered on the East Coast.
Hmm.
So, and then I've got some scattered. So, okay, well, if I have underperforming stores, do I keep those to keep the presence? If I have 10 to 30% bottom, then do I maybe just consolidate some of the stores in here and just shift to like more of a superstore? If the kind of competitors are going away and underperforming, can I fix that? Is that a management thing? Because the management of the store, we've all been to a store with a bad manager, right? It completely changes the experience. So
Right. Yeah.
could that be the case? If I do have, say, great managers in underperforming territories, like how do you do that? Like the inventory that's there, do you liquidate it or shuffle it? Like what do you do with that, right? So I do
Right.
like that. I like that Bed Bath brought in Alex Partners to help with this because like that's what they do, restructuring. I really
Hmm.
just want to show that because there are moving parts to this, because it is complex, that I can walk in on how the results might not appear as good as we want them in Q4, and this stuff's going to trickle more to Q1, Q2, right? So
Hmm.
I do like bringing in some external because not bagging on middle management, but when you're talking about cutting stores, people have their kingdoms, people have their turf wars, right? So by bringing someone objective from the outside, I can get a better outcome, right? You just got to spend a little more upfront to bring them in and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So then if you're looking at like closing stores, you're really talking about marginal analysis, right? Because like we're trying to find incremental improvements to the business. And I got this text here. I'm not going to read it. People can just watch it and back and pause it. this part on the right is what I want to focus on, because I want to show the math on why Q4 might not be as good because we don't have all the pieces in, and by Q1, Q2 for sure, you'll fully realize the savings, right? So when you talk about closing a store, I'm saying this because I see some conflicting things on Reddit, right? So you're going to lose the gross profit on the store, right? Revenue minus cost of goods. So you're going to lose that gross profit, which say it's a plus million, but then you're going to save the variable expenses, right? Which is typically the retail staff, um, some associated costs of stores. Let's say the store is losing money and you save 2 million in variable. Well, you're already positive a million, right?
Mhm.
Now, typically on fixed costs, right? Fixed costs are sunk, but since we're closing the stores, that's relevant. So you'd include those lease payments, and then you're going to have one-timers, or if you have to break a lease, right? So if this is a lease store, there's probably going to be like a lease break fee that you got to pay,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not. So
Unless they
you'll
own
get
the properties,
less
within
thing
those
own,
leases. Yeah. So sometimes that's the case, sometimes not all the time. But
right? So you'll
yeah.
get. So if you have the store, we sell it, we'll get cash, and then you'll get a pop to OIE, right? When you sell a store, it's not revenue, it's other income, other expense. But you can already see for the year to date, we've had 124 million of restructuring charges, right? Which is a good chunk, and that's just from the stuff we've already done already, right? So given the speed of closures, and then the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, if I was Bed Bath Management, I would most likely try to accelerate as much as I could into Q4 because I really want a clean start in Q1, right? Because people know, I'm not trying to be crass here, but people know they know it's not gonna be great in Q4, right? So
Mhm.
just go full bore, close as much as I can, go ahead and start trying to pivot to e-commerce, start trying to pivot now so I can just get all that stuff out of the way. And so
So
Q1 lowers the bar.
let me ask you something, Bears. Okay. So Sue Gov said Q4 would be cash flow neutral. How the fuck do we get from here to cash flow neutral? Out of curiosity, from an accountant's point of view, what kind of steps do you take to get to Q4 neutral? And does that take into account possibly some form of a squeeze to sell those ATM shares that they have, or whatever it may be? But or they, I know that they have the new buyer with like the warrants, they can dilute
Mm.
after a certain amount of time. But how do you as an accountant view, how do we get from where we are currently with the financials to Q4 cash flow neutral, like Sue Gov said? And I know you like Sue Gov
Mm.
a lot, and I know that you listen to her, you're like, well, maybe she has a plan. How would she execute that plan in your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of forecasting revenue, retail is big on, when you do a retail business, you're really going to look at the same this day this year versus the same day last year, right? Because there's so
Hmm.
much seasonality to this, that when you do your P&L or your income statements, you're going to look for, like, you're going to have weekly meetings. You should be, where as a store manager, I got to report to my general manager how this week compared to this same week last year, right?
Hmm.
So I will say, if I kind of, I'll walk the math on the cash flow stuff, but we do know projected Q4 revenue because Bed Bath told us in the Q2 presentation we're going to be about 20% off of what Q4 last fiscal year was,
Hmm.
which that was like 2.1 billion, right? And so
Hmm.
I do have the math on walking. There is a way to walk the math.
Hmm.
I don't need Bed Bath to tell me what the revenue is. We can look at priors and forecast it, right? Because
Sure.
retail is so seasonality driven
Right.
that it's a little easier to do that. But it's a good question. So I'll keep marching down through it. So just to kind of highlight how complicated this closing store is, like even management is telling us that they cannot estimate the range to be incurred for future store closures in connection with these restructurings,
Hmm.
both with respect to major types, costs, and blah blah blah, right? And people can read this on their own time, but all this to say, like, this is why I wanted to walk. If you see Q4 charges come in high, this is why, because management's putting the foot to the floor and shutting these stores down. They don't have an estimate, which is kind of unusual, but I get it, because if you're trying to, get rid of three things but add two, but take this away, like, and then you're shift to e-commerce, like, okay, that's a lot. Just expense it as it incurs, right? So, uh, liquidity. This is where I want people to check my math because, this is where the going concern stuff comes into play, and this is what'll get us to the cash flow stuff, right? So what you're trying to do as a business, if you're trying to invest in this thing and you care about the business itself, then you got to understand how much cash is available to run the thing, right? Just straight up. So we know. So when you do this, you start with Q3. You're going to estimate Q4 burn to come up with beginning of Q1 cash, right? So we know in Q3 we had a $1.13 billion line of credit. We drew 736, and that leaves us with about 390 million of available loans, right? The FILO was fully tapped out, so nothing there. We had 153 million in cash. Now you fast forward to this 8K thing, and you can see in the statement where they dropped the ABL from 1.13 to 565, right? So I gave up 565 million of liquidity, but they gave me 100 million back from the FILO expansion, right? Because the FILO went from I think like 375 to 475. And then on the potential dilution side, I think they got about 255. I did this a few days ago. It might have changed slightly. Plus, we know there's about 800 million on the preferred one, right? The one with the 615 warrant strike price.
Yeah.
About 800 million. Oh God, this shit's exhausting. So then you go down to the filing, and then on the filing they said, okay, well we're going to have a $428 million principal. Well, when you back into the payment, you have to pay that down 307 million to get down to the 428. So all that long boomer talk is just to say, here is the equation on how much available liquidity is. If Bed Bath had the full 1 billion they have starting in Q4 with this much, right? So my theory is they're burning $250 million per quarter on operations and investing. So that gets you 3 to 4 quarters, right?
But that's not to say they close, because in your beginning of your presentation we had 651 stores. If they shut that down to, what was it, 360 stores, that could significantly reduce a lot of that fucking money that they're burning every month, I'm assuming.
Right. So it's all a game, right? If you spend more to shut the stores down now, then you have to make up more money on the stores later, right? So for people, come here, sweet girl, you going crazy on me? So for going concern stuff, right? We got a 75% chance that you're going to be liquidated in 12 months and you get slapped with a going concern, right? We do know that it should be 250 million, 300 million a quarter burn. And so I think the going concern disclosure stays on for Q4. That is going to be a discussion between Bed Bath and KPMG management, right? Like, it would be nice if it came off, because that shows moving in the right direction. And for KPMG to sign off on removing it, then that would imply that you have 12 months of runway, right? So if you see it come off in the Q4 statement, then you got to understand that between Bed Bath management and KPMG, they both agree that y'all now have 12 months of runway. If it's on there, then you got less than 12. Okay. So that's the only reason I wanted to come on and talk to that part. So God, the dog is heavy. So
I think too, Bearz, you're absolutely right. Trying to estimate all the closing fees for different locations.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Like some leases, it depends on who the landlord is, but they will have literally penalties and so on. Whereas other landlords that they may have negotiated with, they may have had preferred terms for them to exit because they were an anchor tenant. So
or they could have paid the leases up front as well. That's a lot of things that happen too, is they'll sometimes pay the leases outright, take the loss then, and then they'll just recoup the money from the rest of the year. So it's possible. It's hard to say.
And then you got the staff too, right? Like maybe you can relocate some of the staff and you put them somewhere else. So it's just, it is, I really wanted, the reason I showed that slide is because I wanted to show what Sue's dealing with on a lower level, because I think a lot of it gets lost in the headlines, like how tricky and difficult this stuff is to actually execute, and the fact they're ripping through it as fast as they are with Alex Partner, I think it speaks a lot. So that's my main rationale for that. So
in your opinion, Bearz, would you say that based on the execution you're seeing and the cost cutting, that this plan has actually been in the works for a lot longer? Because for them to kind of, just prior to their financials, Sue Grove said, we're contemplating bankruptcy, but for all the work and the execution and even securing this $1.1 billion within 24 hours, it tells me that actually a master plan's been underway for like 6 months.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
I agree.
thinking as well.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. Just because, like I've said all along, even when you're going through chapter 11 or like going face first towards it, you still got to act like an operating business, right? So you still have to plan stuff. So you got to launch new brands, you got to hire new people, you got to um, plan all this stuff out. You got to close the stores, you got to shift to e-commerce. You have to do all the things that you're going to do to survive because you want to come out on the other end, right? So the second you start acting like a bankrupt company, you will become a bankrupt company, right? So no, that's a good comment. Let me catch up on any comments or I've been rambling on old man style.
Yeah, I'm so surprised you came like fucking prepared, man. Like fucking Bearz came in like he was like fucking ready for a job, man. Like PB's about to hire him for some shit.
Yeah, I was like, well, I want to, I did, like I said, I didn't want to do a full post. I'm like, well, I'll just come on here and talk through it.
Yeah.
Just because the stream's been really nice to me, so let's just do it on here, and then it saves me from
That's
having
awesome.
to type out all this mess.
Yeah.
M&A thoughts on M&A time frame. If Kirkland has been involved, it could take another 6 months. Yeah, this M&A takes a long time, right? So I'm not super deep on that side of things, but if they could have been involved for a while now, but it's just that's hard for me to say. I just speculate on I hate to do that.
Yeah, it's all speculation that it's over and whatever it may be.
Leo will need to see clear strength inventory. Yeah, that's a great point. Like, so the thing about when you revamp these stores is you got to figure out from a retail perspective who your customer is and why they're in the store, right? And then when you know why they're in the store, you put that crap in the back corner of the store, and then you use your data team to tell you when person buys product X, they're also going to buy products Y and Z. You park those things right next to it, and then you make it like a maze to get to, right? Because there's a whole psychology to retail that like these Fortune 500 companies do, right? So they're trying to get you to part with your money. And I don't know, I haven't researched it, but Bed Bath's got to figure out why people are in the stores and what makes them part with their money, right? So when they come out of all this, so that's a good point, Leo. Actually, Leo and I went to high school together, so it's crazy he's even in the feed.
Oh
It's a really
yeah,
small
that
world.
you guys, that's right, because you guys like had found each other on like a really
Yeah,
early stream. That's fucking
yeah, I hadn't
such a
talked to him
small
in
world, man.
15 years.
So weird.
200. Yeah, okay, so okay, that's pretty much all. Yeah, about 100 shares. I wanted to keep true to my word, right? Like I said, if Q4 had runway, I would stake out an equity position. They did it, so here we are. I'm
Yeah.
still here.
Thank
But
fucking
it's
God, man. Thank God we weren't all liquidated, right?
Hey, Bearz, multiply
gosh, I feel right to it.
420.69 by 100.
I'm not doing that, man. I'm not.
He's gonna
I
start
just I'm
going
not
heavy.
I'm
He's
not
gonna
touching
start
that
getting
with
more
a 10.
shares.
Yeah, y'all are insane. Oh, I love it. Okay, so let's talk some break evens,
Let's
right?
see.
So we know this is straight from management presentation from Q2, right? So decline of 20% for comp sales versus last year, right? So just let's go check the math, right? So Q4 last year was a little over 2 billion, so I knock off 20%, gets you to 1.64 billion of projected Q4 revenue. Now, no, I don't want to be mean here, but this feels low, only going 20% off. And I say that because they're closing more stores than they anticipated. And we know the inventory has been a bigger deal, getting it on the shelves, right? Like if you can consolidate the stores and you have less stores to push the inventory, the stores will look more full. But now we're just kind of in this weird limbo, right? So I do think 1.6 feels like the ceiling to me, right? I think revenues are probably going to come in more like 1.4, 1.5 because you're closing some of these stores, you can't get them stocked, and the e-commerce thing isn't fully spun up yet. We're getting there, but it's a monster shift, right? So
Right.
let's just go with 1.6. Okay.
Okay.
Now the gross margin we know has been struggling, right? So Q2 gross margin was 31%. Q1 was 31%. This was Q2. And then Q3 came in at 22, and all along this path, management would try to tell us like this is transitory, right? Supply chain, and I just got a huge grain of supply chain has been a thing, and it will continue to be a thing, right? So it's just I think I don't know that I fully buy trying to claim this much of a drop as mostly supply chain and stuff, but like I'm trying to be a more patient guy. So we'll give it to him. So let's just say, let's give him 2 points, right? We'll bump gross margin to 24%. So if I'm projecting 1.64 billion of revenue, my gross margin is 24%. You multiply those together and you get 390 million in gross profit. Okay. Now that's half the equation. The other half is going to be the SG&A, right? That's going to be your effectively fixed cost, right? So if you want to get to net operating a zero, you have to fully cover your SG&A with your gross profit, right? So we know SG&A for Q3 was 583 million, okay, and they've been aggressively cutting it, but it's easy to cut the fat to start with, right? Like if you have a bloated SG&A, right? Like everyone's worked at those companies, you know who goes first, right? There's always a few people that get cut first. When you get past that, it gets tougher, right? So let's say they cut it down to 500 million. Well, now I got an operating loss of 110 million, which it's not the end of the world, but like, let's keep marching on, right? And I figured it got kind of dry at this point. So there's my dog.
Yeah.
So we know that management was going to spend 125 million in capex, right? Like they told us, here you go, capex of 250. So split the baby. So between the 110 million loss and the 125 million in capex spend, I'm now 235 million in the hole to get the cash flow neutral. What's super interesting about all this is the immediate access to cash I got to was roughly 225, 250, which about dead on what we're saying here, right? Like between the operating and investing. So it does get them cash flow neutral. They had to dilute to get there, right? Which is fine. Like you got the cash flow neutral. It's just, one time if I can take a bath in I guess the summary of all this, if I can take a bath in Q4, if I can close my stores down, if I can go ahead and start spinning up e-commerce, I've reduced personnel. I'm okay with a bad Q4 to set up a good Q1, Q2. Okay.
Sure.
It's just that I don't want people to get blindsided when these results come out. Cause like we know these retail heavy stocks, when they miss earnings, it's going to be ugly, right? They're going to come for it. So
they're already fucking hitting it every day, man. Fuck.
Yeah. So I'm not saying this to be a shill. I'm just saying, hey, it might be coming. Here's all my math. Here's how I walked it. So just please, do what you want with it and double check me, right? I do think there are some positives, if you accelerate the expenses, that's easier for next year. If you're closing more stores, you have to get more margin out of those stores or do more in e-commerce to get back to even, right? I do like the e-commerce shift. Like, yeah, no arguments there.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Makes sense. Everyone's doing it, right? If you're closing stores, you're going to have a leaner SG&A and leaner cost structure overall, but you got to just find the gross profit, right? And then the rewards, increased membership, it's good stuff.
Those are still going up too.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all good stuff, right? So,
let me ask my man. You got the SG&A at 500 million there, but that's kind of based on the quarter two, right? Where they had 600 stores running. And because retail is predominantly staff, could you not say that the SG&A could significantly drop? Not by a 50 margin, but would you not say at least 20 to 30 points?
Yeah, no, it's fair. That's why I wanted to show this, because the SG&A is the wild card in this, right? So if you've got, if you drop it 80 on 580, that's 13%, right? Which is kind of low to get. So if I went from 580 to 500, it's only a 13% drop. Yeah. If you're closing half the stores, then maybe you go, 580 times, let's just say 30%, right? Minus 580 is 406. So then you're closer to break even. And that's why I just want to show more the structure for how to do break evens, and it just didn't stand up here and give a number, right? So my thing to people would be, do your own math, go back and look at what management was saying, go back and look at revenue numbers, triangulate that against the closed stores so you can come up with your own gross profit number. And then the second half of that equation is, okay, now you're going to come in and try to estimate what SG&A is to see where the operating part of the cash flow statement goes, right? Yeah. So that's how I walk cash flow assertions, right? But yeah, like I said, people do their own math and double check me, right? So yeah.
I think we're headed in the right direction, though. Obviously it's going to take still some masterful cleaning of the house, so to speak, and putting all the ducks in order. But and you're right. not knowing the costs of ending all the lease. There will be one-time fees, revamping some of the distribution centers that are now going to have double the occupancy or double the product flow through them because they closed the one beside it. There's a lot of one-time expenses, but ultimately I do see this being kind of if I stand by Sue, if she says it's going to be cash flow positive, or I honestly think they're going to hit that. Now my question is whether they're going to start Q1 on a very well trimmed, ready, let's
That's
go.
what I'm curious to see
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I do think. I think she gets there, or it's gonna be close. Because that SG&A is just such a wild card, right? Like, how much can they really cut? I mean, she's done a lot. I think the equity deal, provided they can tap into the 800 million, right? My redneck answer, like, that gets you to through Q2, maybe into Q3 if they do nothing else right. So she got the runway. And it's like, if you close these stores, you can do the e-commerce stuff and just keep doing the 1 day thing. Like, I mean, it is encouraging, but it's probably gonna get worse before it gets better, right? So do that what you will. And then the rest of this is just backup, where I was pulling information off. This is what management, and like I said, I'm just gonna blow through this because people can pause it later, but this is just out of one of the 10 Qs. This is where they talk about closing the 360 stores. This is the thing I showed earlier. This is where they talk about the potential dilution and how much it is in terms of the existing float. And this is where I walk the math on the gross profit stuff. So good times. Yeah.
It was really well made.
Thanks.
Here, I'll close your screen out for you. Really, really well made. And like, yeah, I just have a feeling that the Q4 neutral cash has to come from the ATM selling it at a high price. I mean, I would assume that that's what's going to get them into that, because those shares are